At 10:42 a.m. on December 1st, 1944, Lieutenant Alfred Rose climbed into the turret of an M36 Jackson tank destroyer positioned on high ground northeast of Beeck, Germany. He began familiarizing himself with controls he barely understood while German armor prowled the countryside 2 miles away. Rose was 26 years old, had spent just 3 weeks with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion, and had 0 confirmed kills. The Germans had deployed elements of the 5th Panzer Army across the Rhineland, including at least 40 Panther tanks whose frontal armor could deflect American rounds from 800 yards. Rose's battalion had already lost 11 tank destroyers in November. 17 crewmen were dead. The pattern never changed. German gunners spotted American positions first and fired first. American crews were killed before they understood what had hit them. The M10 Wolverine tank destroyers they'd been using couldn't penetrate Panther armor beyond 500 yards. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. By the time American crews closed the distance for a kill shot, German 88mm guns had already turned their vehicles into burning coffins. The Army's answer arrived in September, the M36 Jackson. Built on a Sherman chassis, it mounted the most powerful American tank gun in Europe, a 90mm cannon capable of penetrating up to 6 inches of armor at 1,500 yards. On paper, it solved the Panther problem. In reality, Rose had fired exactly 4 training rounds through the gun. He didn't know the reticle markings. He didn't understand the ranging system. He didn't know whether the telescopic sight matched the technical manual or reflected undocumented field modifications. His commander had told him to learn quickly. The battalion was being repositioned to support Operation Clipper, the push to clear German forces from the Siegfried Line fortifications around Geilenkirchen. Intelligence warned of German armor counterattacks across the entire sector. Panthers, Tigers, self-propelled guns, targets that demanded gunners who knew their weapons instinctively. Rose studied the M76F telescopic sight mounted in front of the gunner's position. The reticle showed range markings in 100-yard increments. The farthest marking read 4,600 yards. Maximum effective range, 2.61 miles. He had never heard of armor being engaged at that distance. Tank combat usually happened at 500 yards, maybe 1,000 with favorable terrain. Anything beyond that belonged to artillery. The Jackson's turret was cramped. The loader sat to his left. The commander stood above and behind him. The driver and assistant driver were down in the hall. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Rose ran his hands over the traverse controls, the elevation wheel, the firing mechanism. Nothing felt natural. 3 weeks wasn't enough time to build the muscle memory that kept gunners alive. He needed months. He had hours. The high ground northeast of Beeck provided clear sight lines across the countryside. Open fields, broken tree lines, and a highway running roughly parallel to their position. Good ground for spotting targets, and just as good for being spotted. German forward observers had been calling in artillery all week. The battalion stayed dispersed, never clustering more than 2 vehicles together. Rose pressed his face against the rubber eyepiece of the M76F sight. The optics were clean. Magnification was solid. He practiced sweeping the horizon, adjusting elevation and watching the reticle slide across the landscape. The markings were precise, 400, 800, 1,200, stretching all the way out to that final line at 4,600 yards. At 11:15, movement caught his eye at the very edge of the sight picture. Something dark and angular moved slowly across his field of view, at a distance that seemed absurd for direct fire. The object traveled left to right, far beyond normal engagement range. As he steadied the sight, the shape resolved into the unmistakable silhouette of a German Panther tank. Low profile. Long gun barrel. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Sloped armor that made frontal penetration nearly impossible. It was moving along what appeared to be a road, traveling maybe 6 to 8 miles per hour. Rose's first instinct was to report the contact and let someone else handle it. The range had to be over 2 miles. No one shot tanks at that distance. Ballistic drop alone could send the round sailing overhead or bury it hundreds of yards short. Crosswinds would shove the shell off course. At that range, the margin for error was measured in fractions of a degree. But the Panther wasn't weaving. It wasn't accelerating or slowing. It rolled straight down that distant road, completely unaware that an American tank destroyer was tracking it from high ground 2.5 miles away. It was the kind of target that appeared once in a war, if you were lucky, and Rose had exactly zero experience engaging anything like it. He checked the reticle again. The M76F sight had been designed specifically for the 90mm gun. The range markings weren't guesswork. They were calculated from muzzle velocity, standard armor-piercing ballistics, and expected combat conditions. The engineers had included the 4,600-yard mark for a reason. They believed the gun could reach that far. Whether it could hit anything at that distance was another matter. Rose began calculating. The Panther was moving perpendicular to his position. That meant he would have to lead the target. At 2.5 miles, the round would take several seconds to reach impact. In that time, the Panther would continue moving. He would need to aim ahead of the tank by dozens of yards, perhaps more. The calculation demanded precise range, exact target speed, and accurate projectile flight time. Rose had none of those values with certainty. The M36 Jackson carried two types of main gun ammunition. The M82 armor-piercing capped round was intended for defeating armor. It contained a large explosive filler designed to detonate after penetration, maximizing internal damage. At 500 yards, it could penetrate about 5.1 inches of armor. At 1,000 yards, roughly 4.8 inches. At 4,600 yards, the penetration tables in the technical manual simply stopped. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The assumption was clear. No one was expected to fire at that distance. Rose understood the physics. Every additional yard meant more velocity loss, more drop, more wind drift. By the time an M82 round traveled 4,600 yards, much of its kinetic energy would be gone. Even a hit might fail against the Panther's frontal armor. The side armor, however, was another matter. 40 to 50 millimeters thick, about 1.6 to 2 inches, it was vulnerable to the 90mm gun, even at extreme range. The Panther continued its steady movement along the distant highway. Rose made a decision that violated everything tank destroyer doctrine had taught him. He would take the shot, not because he believed it would succeed, but because this was the only way to learn whether the M36's systems could perform at their theoretical maximum range. His hand moved to the traverse control. He began tracking the Panther, keeping it centered in the reticle while his mind raced through the variables. Without lifting his eye from the sight, Rose called out the contact to his commander. Panther. Extreme range. Moving lateral. The commander climbed up beside him, looked through his own optics, and remained silent for 5 seconds. When he spoke, his answer was brief. Rose's call. Rose's shot. The loader already had an M82 armor-piercing round chambered. Standard procedure. Tank destroyers kept AP loaded at all times in combat zones. Rose focused on the ranging problem. The M76F sight showed distance markings, but estimating range to a moving target at 2.5 miles required more than eyeballing the reticle. He would need to bracket the target with ranging shots. Ranging fire was routine for artillery. Shoot short, shoot long, walk rounds onto the target. For a tank destroyer at 400 yards, ranging fire was suicide. It revealed your position and gave the enemy time to return fire or maneuver. At 4,600 yards, the Panther crew wouldn't hear the shots, wouldn't see the muzzle flash, wouldn't even know they were being engaged until rounds began landing nearby. Rose set the elevation for what he estimated was 4,000 yards, short of where he believed the target actually was. He wanted to observe the impact and adjust. Using the traverse controls, he tracked the Panther's movement. The tank maintained a constant speed along the distant highway. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. He led the target by roughly 50 yards, his best estimate for the Panther's movement during the shell's flight. He squeezed the trigger. The recoil of the 90mm gun rocked the turret. The muzzle blast was enormous. Even with the double baffle muzzle brake the Army had begun installing in November. Smoke and dust filled the sight for 2 seconds. When it cleared, Rose kept his eye glued to the optic, watching for impact. At 4,000 yards, flight time was about 6 seconds. Rose counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nothing. The distance was too great to see the impact directly through the sight. He would need another shot, watching for dust or ground disturbance to judge where it landed. He adjusted elevation upward, adding another 100 yards. The Panther continued down the highway, apparently unaware that it was being fired upon from a distance 4 times greater than normal tank engagement range. Rose led the target again, this time by 60 yards to account for increased flight time. The second shot fired. Recoil. Smoke. Rose held the sight on the expected impact area. 6 seconds. Maybe 7. He counted again, keeping the Panther centered. The tank showed no sign of evasive action. No indication the crew had spotted the American position on the high ground northeast of Beeck. Then he saw it. A small dust cloud erupted on a highway, roughly 20 yards short of the Panther's position. The round had landed close, very close. Close enough to give Rose solid data for a final correction. Now he knew the range. He knew the lead. He understood the drop. He made one last elevation adjustment. Added 10 yards to his lead to account for the Panther's continued movement. He set the reticle to exactly 4,600 yards, the maximum marking on the M36F sight. He waited for the Panther to reach the precise point where his calculations predicted interception. The moment came. Rose fired the third shot. The 90mm round covered 4,600 yards in approximately 7 seconds. Rose kept the Panther centered in his sight, watching for impact. The M82 armor-piercing shell left the muzzle at roughly 1,500 feet per second. By the time it reached maximum range, its velocity had dropped sharply, but physics favored Rose in one critical way. The Panther's side armor measured only 40 to 50 millimeters thick. Even a 90mm round that had lost much of its velocity still carried enough kinetic energy to punch through it. The hit was visible through the M76F sight as a bright flash along the Panther's left side hull. Rose had judged the lead perfectly. The shell struck just behind the front road wheel, exactly where the side armor was thinnest and where the ammunition racks were stored. A larger secondary explosion followed almost instantly. 79 rounds of 75mm ammunition detonated inside the fighting compartment. The German tank jerked to a halt as smoke poured from the turret hatches. The crew would already be dead or dying. A penetration into the ammunition stowage at that location meant catastrophic internal damage. The loader would have been killed instantly. The pressure wave would have incapacitated everyone else in the turret. Even if anyone survived the initial blast, they would have had only seconds to escape before the fire reached the fuel tanks. Rose did not stop firing. Tank destroyer crews were trained to keep engaging until a target was unquestionably destroyed. A stopped tank was not always a dead tank. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. German crews were known to play dead, waiting for American units to pass before restarting their vehicles and attacking from the rear. Rose had heard stories of Panthers that absorbed multiple hits, appeared knocked out, then returned to action after hurried field repairs. He reloaded another M82 armor-piercing round and fired again. The fourth shot struck the hull near the original penetration point. Inside, the fire was spreading. The fifth round was high explosive. His shells were devastating against immobilized vehicles, ripping away external components and ensuring the flames consumed everything within. Rose fired a sixth round, then a seventh. He continued until flames burst from every hatch and vision port. Thick black smoke, diesel fuel burning, rose in a column visible for miles. There was no chance of survival. No chance of that tank ever returning to service. The engagement lasted roughly 2 minutes from first shot to confirmed kill. Rose had fired 7 90mm rounds, 3 for ranging, to guarantee destruction. The range was 4,600 yards, 2.61 miles, the maximum effective distance marked on the M76F telescopic sight mounted in the M36 Jackson. When Rose finally pulled back from the sight, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from realization. He had destroyed a Panther at a distance beyond anything he had ever heard of in armored combat. The kill went into the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action report. It was witnessed and verified by the commander and the rest of the crew. It became part of the official record. What Rose did not know was that his confirmed kill at 4,600 yards would remain the second longest tank versus tank engagement in military history for the next 47 years, just 500 yards short of a record that would not be broken until a British Challenger achieved an extraordinary shot during the Gulf War in 1991. The burning Panther remained visible on the distant highway for the next 30 minutes. Other American units reported the smoke column. Forward observers tried to determine whether it marked a destroyed German vehicle or a hit American position. The battalion operations officer eventually confirmed the kill through map coordinates and timeline correlation. Rose's position on the high ground northeast of Beeck aligned perfectly with the line of sight to the wreck. By 1300 hours, word had spread through the battalion. A lieutenant nobody had heard of 3 weeks earlier had just made the longest confirmed tank destroyer kill in the European theater. Crews from other M36s began asking questions. What range marking did he use? How many ranging shots? What was the lead calculation? Rose had no clean answers. He had fired on instinct and physics, not a formula other gunners could memorize. The M36 Jackson had only been in combat since September, 4 months of service. For most of 1944, American tank destroyer battalions fought with the M10 Wolverine, whose 3-inch gun could not reliably penetrate German heavy armor beyond 600 yards. The M18 Hellcat was faster, but carried the same underpowered weapon. When Panthers and Tigers appeared in large numbers during Normandy, American crews found themselves outgunned at nearly every range. The 90mm gun changed the equation. Adapted from anti-aircraft artillery designed to reach bombers at 15,000 feet, mounting it in a turret on a Sherman-based chassis gave American forces their first vehicle capable of meeting German heavy armor on equal terms. The M36 could penetrate Panther frontal armor at 1,000 yards. It could destroy Tigers at ranges where the Tiger's own 88mm struggled against the M36's slope front. But the gun's true capability extended far beyond normal engagement distances. The 90mm M3 had a muzzle velocity of 2,700 feet per second. The M82 armor-piercing round weighed 24 pounds. Physics said it could reach targets at 4,000 yards and beyond. The question was never whether the gun could shoot that far. The question was whether anyone could hit a moving tank at that distance. Rose had answered it. Not through superior training. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Not through months of practice. Through 2 ranging shots that gave him the information needed to make the 3rd round count. The engagement proved something the Army Ordnance Department had long suspected but had never confirmed under combat conditions. The M76F telescopic sight's maximum range marking of 4,600 yards was not theoretical. It worked. German forces in the sector continued operating Panthers throughout December. Rose's battalion encountered them repeatedly during the advance toward the Rohr River, but none of those fights took place at extreme range. German crews had learned hard lessons from 2 years on the Eastern Front. They used terrain. They avoided open ground. They placed their tanks in covered positions that forced American units to close within 500 yards for a clear shot. The circumstances that allowed Rose's shot were unique. Elevated ground with commanding view. Open terrain offering long sight lines. A German crew moving along an exposed highway without tactical caution. And a gunner willing to attempt something doctrine said could not be done. Those conditions would not occur again for the rest of the war. By mid-December, the German counteroffensive in the Ardennes pulled most American armored units away from the Ruhr sector. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion was redeployed to support operations against what would become known as the Bulge. Rose would fire the 90mm gun of his M36 many more times before Germany surrendered in May, but he would never again attempt a shot at 4,600 yards. 16 days after Rose's record engagement, the Battle of the Bulge began. On December 16th, German forces launched a massive counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest. 3 entire armies, 200,000 troops, and 600 tanks, including Panthers and King Tigers, surged forward. The attack caught American forces completely by surprise. Within 48 hours, German armored spearheads had driven 30 miles into Allied lines. On December 18th, the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received emergency orders. Redeploy south immediately. Support the 7th Armored Division at St. Vith. The town was a critical road junction. If it fell, German forces would have direct access to the Meuse River crossings, and the entire northern shoulder of the American line would collapse. Rose's company moved through Belgium under cover of darkness. The roads were chaos. Supply trucks streamed west, fleeing the advance. Infantry units struggled to reach defensive positions. Artillery batteries repositioned under fire. The 814th arrived at St. Vth on December 19th and went straight into combat. German Panther units were already engaging American positions on the eastern approaches to the town. The fighting around St. Vth bore no resemblance to Rose's long-range shot near Beeck. This was close-range armored combat. Panthers emerging from tree lines at 300 yards. American tank destroyers firing from behind burning buildings. German infantry armed with Panzerfaust stalking M36s through the streets. In this kind of battle, the side that spotted first survived. Hesitation measured in seconds meant death. Rose's Jackson took position on the southern edge of St. Vth on December 20th. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. His field of fire covered a road junction where German armor was expected. The range was 800 yards, standard engagement distance. No elaborate calculations, just center mass and fire. The attack came at dawn on December 21st. 4 Panthers supported by 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers. Rose's company destroyed 2 Panthers in the first minute. German return fire knocked out 1 M36 and damaged 2 others. The engagement lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, all 4 German tanks were burning and the infantry had withdrawn. American losses were heavy. 3 tank destroyers destroyed. 11 crewmen killed or wounded. Rose survived St. Vth. His Jackson was hit twice by German 75mm guns, both rounds deflected by the frontal armor. The M36's sloped glacis was effectively 140mm thick when struck at an angle. German guns struggled to penetrate it beyond 600 yards, but the open-top turret left the vehicle vulnerable to airbursts and plunging artillery fire. Several M36s in the battalion were lost to indirect fire during the week-long defense. By December 23rd, American forces were forced to abandon St. Vth. German pressure was overwhelming. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The 7th Armored Division executed a fighting withdrawal westward, with the 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion serving as rearguard. Rose fired his 90mm gun 43 times during the retreat, every shot under 1,000 yards, every target clearly visible through his sight. The contrast with December 1st was absolute. At Beeck, he had time to calculate, to range his shots, to engage a target that didn't know it was being hunted. St. Vth, and during the withdrawal, combat was reflexive. Spot. Identify. Fire. No ranging shots. No careful math. Just the brutal arithmetic of armored warfare. Rose never forgot the Panther burning on that distant highway at 4,600 yards. But the shots that kept him alive during the bulge were the ones fired at point-blank range against tanks that were shooting back. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion spent January 1945 rebuilding after the bulge. The battalion had lost 19 M36 Jacksons during the German offensive. 26 crewmen were killed. 41 were wounded. Replacement vehicles arrived from depot stocks in France. Replacement crews came straight from training centers in the United States. Most had never fired a 90mm gun in combat. Rose found himself training the new gunners. He taught them the M76F telescopic sight, how to estimate range, how to lead moving targets, how to adjust for wind and elevation. The new crews asked about his 4,600-yard shot. Rose told them to forget it. That kind of engagement happened once in a war. What mattered was killing Panthers at 500 yards while under fire. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. That was the skill that kept tank destroyer crews alive. By February, the battalion was back in action. American forces pushed toward the Roer River. German resistance was collapsing, but remained fierce at key defensive positions. Panthers and King Tigers still appeared wherever the Wehrmacht tried to hold ground. The M36 Jackson remained the most effective American answer to German heavy armor. Its 90mm gun could penetrate any German tank from the front at normal combat ranges. Rose took part in the Roer River crossings in March. His Jackson supported the 9th Army's assault near Wesel. German forces on the east bank included elements of 3 panzer divisions. The fighting was intense but brief. American air superiority and overwhelming artillery shattered the defenses within 48 hours. During the crossing, Rose's company destroyed 6 Panthers and 2 King Tigers, all at ranges under 800 yards. April brought the final drive into Germany's industrial heartland. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion advanced through the Ruhr pocket, engaging scattered resistance. Most German armor units had been destroyed or had run out of fuel. The Panthers and Tigers that had dominated Europe for 2 years were now burning wrecks or abandoned hulks scattered across hundreds of miles. Rose saw his last combat action on April 23 near the Elbe River. A single Panther emerged from a farm complex at roughly 600 yards, attempting to retreat east ahead of American forces. Rose fired 2 rounds. Both hit. The Panther burned. It was his 47th confirmed kill with the M36's 90mm gun. 46 of those kills had occurred at ranges under 1,000 yards. Germany surrendered on May 8. The 814th Tank Destroyer Battalion received orders to prepare for redeployment to the Pacific Theater. Plans called for re-equipping the battalion with newer M36 variants for use against Japanese armor during the anticipated invasion of the home islands. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The atomic bombs dropped in August made that invasion unnecessary. Rose never fired the 90mm gun in combat again. The after-action reports from December 1, 1944 remained in the battalion's official records. Lieutenant Alfred Rose, M36 Jackson. Panther destroyed at 4,600 yards. Witnessed and verified. The shot was documented in multiple Army publications over the following decades. Military historians cited it as evidence of the M36's capabilities. Gunnery instructors used it as an example of what was theoretically possible with proper ranging and calculation. But the real significance of the shot was not the distance. It was what it revealed about the evolution of armored warfare. The M36 Jackson represented the culmination of American tank destroyer development in the Second World War, a vehicle capable of destroying the heaviest German armor at ranges far beyond what doctrine had anticipated. Rose's 4,600-yard shot proved the weapon could perform at the absolute limits of its design. For 47 years, the record stood as the second longest tank kill in military history. Through Korea, through Vietnam, through decades of Cold War doctrine and technological advancement, the U.S. Army fielded better guns, improved ammunition, and more advanced fire control systems, but no American crew documented a confirmed kill at greater range. The record was finally broken on February 26, 1991. A British Challenger 1 tank, called Sign 11B, was operating in Iraq during Operation Desert Storm. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The crew detected an Iraqi tank at extreme range during the ground campaign to liberate Kuwait. Using depleted uranium ammunition, laser rangefinders, thermal imaging, and computerized fire control systems that did not exist in 1944, the gunner fired. The round struck at 5,100 yards, 3.1 miles, the longest confirmed tank versus tank kill in history. Rose's shot dropped to second place, but context matters. The Challenger crew in 1991 had stabilized guns, ballistic computers, and digital fire control systems that automatically calculated lead and elevation. Rose had mechanical controls, an optical sight, and 3 years of wartime experience compressed into 3 weeks. He made that shot with the tools of 1944 against a moving target at the absolute edge of practical combat range. The M36 Jackson remained in American service through the Korean War. It performed effectively against North Korean and Chinese armor. Its 90mm gun could penetrate any tank fielded by communist forces, but engagement distances in Korea were far shorter than those in Europe. Mountainous terrain and restricted sight lines meant most tank combat occurred at under 500 yards. No gunner ever repeated Rose's extreme range engagement. Rose survived the war. He left active duty in 1946 and returned to civilian life. The Army attempted to recruit him as a gunnery instructor at Fort Knox, but he declined. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. He had spent 3 years firing at people. He was finished. Records show that Rose never spoke publicly about December 1, 1944. There are no interviews, no memoirs, no effort to profit from his place in military history. The after-action reports remain in the archives, largely untouched, until historians uncovered them decades later while researching tank destroyer operations in Northwest Europe. The 4,600-yard engagement appeared in multiple academic studies on armored warfare. Military analysts cited it as a case study in the outer limits of direct-fire combat. It represented the maximum effective range achievable by Second World War-era tank guns under ideal conditions. If this story moved you the way it moved us, take a moment and hit the like button. Every like helps share these forgotten stories with more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already. We're pulling history out of dusty archives every day. Stories of tank destroyer gunners who saved lives through calculation, discipline, and precision. These were real people. This was real heroism. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, whether it's the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else entirely. Our community spans the world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of preserving these memories. Tell us if someone in your family served. Let us know you're here. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Lieutenant Alfred Rose doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.